Have you ever wondered if the biggest threat to society isn't hatred or even ignorance, but something far more subtle and insidious? What if I told you that stupidity isn't just a lack of intelligence, but a kind of force, something that doesn't just make people wrong, but makes them dangerous? Imagine this: brilliant scientists, dedicated teachers, even loving parents, people we normally admire, suddenly start promoting ideas that are clearly harmful. They aren't bad people. They're not evil. They're not even uneducated. So what's going on? This is the question that haunted Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian, philosopher, and anti-Nazi dissident. And what he came to believe about the power of stupidity is truly terrifying. Now, before we dive into his theory and why it's more relevant today than ever, I want you to think about something. Have you ever caught yourself believing something just because everyone around you seemed to believe it too? Maybe you didn't even question it. Maybe you felt it was right simply because it was repeated over and over. That's not just social pressure. That's part of something deeper, something that Bonhoeffer believed could destroy entire societies from the inside out. So let's back up a bit. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wasn't just a guy scribbling down theories in a quiet library. He lived through one of the most horrifying and confusing periods in human history: Nazi Germany. Born in 1906 into a highly educated, respected family, Bonhoeffer was surrounded by reason, science, intellectual debate. His father was a top neurologist. He grew up believing in the power of education, of truth, of critical thinking. And yet, he watched in real time as his entire nation, including the smartest and most moral people he knew, slowly lost their minds. Teachers, doctors, clergy, neighbors, friends. These weren't people brainwashed by lies overnight. They were people who, little by little, started repeating slogans instead of asking questions. They stopped thinking for themselves. That's what disturbed Bonhoeffer more than anything. He saw that evil didn't always announce itself with violence or hatred. Sometimes, it came disguised as certainty, as loyalty, as common sense. And so, from a Nazi prison cell in 1943, Bonhoeffer wrote something that still sends chills down the spine of anyone who reads it. Against stupidity, we are defenseless. Neither protest nor force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears. Let that sink in. He wasn't saying stupid people are the problem. He wasn't mocking low IQ or a lack of education. No, he was pointing to a different kind of stupidity, one that takes hold of people who could think clearly, but don't. Not because they can't, but because they've stopped trying. He wrote that when you talk to someone in this state, you're not really talking to them. You're talking to the slogans, the catchphrases, the scripts that have taken over their mind. Sound familiar? Let's talk about how this shows up today. Back in the 1960s, a researcher named Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment at Yale University. Maybe you've heard of it. Volunteers were told to administer electric shocks to a person in another room every time they answered a question incorrectly. The shocks weren't real, but the participants didn't know that. They heard screams, pleading, silence. Yet, 65% of them kept going, right up to what they believed were fatal levels, just because an authority figure told them to. These weren't sadists. They were ordinary people. People like you and me. People who, under pressure, handed over their ability to judge right and wrong. That's exactly what Bonhoeffer had seen happen in Germany. And it's what he feared most. Not evil people doing evil things, but good people surrendering their judgment, stopping their thinking. So what exactly is this stupidity Bonhoeffer talks about? He wasn't being insulting. He was describing what we might call today functional stupidity or willful ignorance. It's not a lack of mental capacity. It's a decision, often unconscious, to stop engaging with complexity, to outsource thinking to others, to settle into the comfort of certainty. And it doesn't happen by accident. Our society encourages it. Think about the systems we live in. Social media platforms profit when we react emotionally, not critically. News outlets get more clicks from outrage than nuance. Politicians win elections with catchy slogans, not complicated policies. When you're juggling 2 jobs, buried in debt, stressed, overwhelmed, you don't have time to read 60-page reports or study economic theories. You grab the headline. You skim the tweet. You go with your gut. And slowly, very slowly, you stop asking deeper questions. You stop checking. You stop thinking. This is what economists call rational ignorance. It actually makes sense on an individual level not to spend energy on things that don't bring an immediate benefit. But collectively, it creates a society that's easy to manipulate. Just like Nazi Germany. Just like the Red Scare. Just like now. It's not just the media, though. It's how our brains work. In the 1950s, Leon Festinger came up with the idea of cognitive dissonance. The tension we feel when we're faced with information that contradicts our beliefs. And what do we do with that tension? We don't change our beliefs. Most of the time, we reject the new information. Why? Because it's uncomfortable. Bonhoeffer saw this before the science did. He knew that when people are stressed, scared, or insecure, they're more likely to cling to simple, comforting narratives, even if they're false. It's not about logic. It's about survival. And things get worse when we're in groups. He wrote that stupidity wasn't really a psychological issue, but a sociological one. That people could be perfectly reasonable on their own, but once they joined a group, especially one with strong identity and rules, they started parroting the group's beliefs, no matter how absurd. Later studies prove this. In Solomon Asch's famous experiment, people were asked to compare line lengths on a card. It was obvious which line matched. But when actors in the group all gave the wrong answer out loud, 75% of participants went along with them at least once, even though they knew it was wrong. Now, take that experiment and drop it into the world of social media. Every day, we're bombarded with takes, opinions, and narratives, all reinforced by likes, shares, and comments. You get rewarded for agreeing. You get attacked for questioning. And over time, your feed starts showing you more of what you already believe and less of what challenges it. A study from MIT in 2018 found that false information spreads 6 times faster than the truth on platforms like Twitter. Why? Because lies are designed to be satisfying. Truth, on the other hand, is often complex and uncomfortable. When you see someone sharing a conspiracy theory or spreading false news, it's tempting to roll your eyes and dismiss them. But Bonhoeffer would warn us, that person might not be dumb in the traditional sense. They might be someone who has, consciously or not, given up their intellectual independence. And if the systems around them reward that surrender, why wouldn't they? That's what makes this theory so chilling. It's not about bad people doing bad things. It's about good people who've stopped thinking for themselves. And that's why Bonhoeffer didn't just call out individuals. He called out the systems. The structures that reward conformity and punish curiosity. The institutions that make it easier to believe a lie than to think critically. He believed that the only real antidote to stupidity was something he called costly grace. A willingness to think even when it's hard, even when it's unpopular, even when it's dangerous. So let's talk more about this idea, costly grace. What Bonhoeffer meant by that wasn't just a kind of moral courage. It was the idea that clear thinking, real thinking, takes effort. It's expensive, not in money, but in comfort, in ease, in safety. It means risking being wrong. It means risking being alone. And for Bonhoeffer, it meant risking his life. He was eventually executed for his part in a plot to assassinate Hitler. But even as he sat in a prison cell, he refused to give up his ability to think clearly, to question, to resist slogans and blind faith. He believed that surrendering your mind was the first step in surrendering your soul. And now, with everything we know today, his theory seems almost prophetic. Because it's not just about Nazi Germany anymore. It's about us right now. In a world run by algorithms, where your attention is bought, sold, and manipulated, where every click feeds an invisible machine that learned how to shape your thoughts. The battle for your mind isn't just historical. It's happening right now. Let's get real for a second. You know how sometimes your social media feed seems to read your mind? You think about something and suddenly, boom, it's there. A post, a video, a recommendation. It's not magic. It's data. It's your behavior being tracked down to the microsecond. Every pause, every scroll, every like. And what you're seeing isn't the full picture. It's a curated world designed to keep you emotionally engaged, and that often means feeding you what you already believe. And the scary part? It works. It works really well, because our brains are wired for it. See, human beings evolve in environments where quick decisions could mean life or death. Our ancestors didn't have time to deeply analyze whether a rustling bush was a tiger or just the wind. Fast, instinctive judgment kept them alive, and we inherited that same wiring. We're built to trust familiarity, to avoid cognitive overload, to stick with our tribe, to seek information that confirms our beliefs and reject anything that contradicts them. That's great when you're in the wilderness, trying to avoid being eaten. But in the modern world, where we're surrounded by a constant stream of complex, nuanced information, that wiring becomes a liability. And guess what? Tech companies know this. Media outlets know this. Political operatives definitely know this. And they build systems to exploit it. Just look at the rise of misinformation during the COVID-19 pandemic. Engineers, doctors, lawyers, people who are trained to think critically suddenly started sharing wild conspiracy theories. Not because they were dumb, but because they were overwhelmed, stressed, and looking for something certain to hold on to. Bonhoeffer saw this kind of thing long before we had social media or smartphones. He saw that under pressure, even the best minds could fall into intellectual laziness. Not because they wanted to, but because it felt safer than standing alone in uncertainty. And it's not just about individuals. It's about systems. It's about the architecture of our information environments. Think about this. Most online platforms are designed to reward engagement. Not truth, not honesty, just clicks, views, reactions. The more emotionally charged the content, the better it performs. And what kind of content gets the most engagement? The kind that triggers fear, outrage, certainty, not curiosity, not nuance, not maybe I'm wrong. So we have these massively powerful systems that are literally engineered to reward the kind of thinking Bonhoeffer warned us about. Not deep thinking, not independent thinking, but functional stupidity. That's the terrifying part. It's not that we've suddenly become less intelligent. It's that the structures around us reward us for shutting our brains off. And that means the fight isn't just personal, it's political, it's systemic. Bonhoeffer believed that to truly resist stupidity, we need more than individual awareness. We need structural resistance. Let's break that down a bit. First, on the personal level, there are things we can do. Practices we can build. Think of them like mental workouts. They're uncomfortable at first, but they make your mind stronger. Here are a few that really matter. 1. Practice intellectual friction. Set aside time every week to read or listen to someone you disagree with. Seriously, don't just hate watch. Actually try to understand where they're coming from. Not to change your mind necessarily, but to test your own views. Can they hold up under pressure? 2. Embrace productive ignorance. This sounds weird, but stay with me. When you feel absolutely certain about something, pause. Ask yourself, what evidence would make me change my mind? If the answer is nothing, that's a red flag. That means you're not holding a belief, you're being held by one. 3. Slow down your sharing. Before you post or share anything, stop for 60 seconds. That's it, just 1 minute. Look it up, check the source, verify it from at least one independent outlet. That brief pause breaks the emotional loop. It gives your thinking brain a chance to catch up with your reacting brain. Say I don't know more often. It's hard, especially online where everyone wants to appear confident and certain. But admitting what you don't know is powerful. It signals intellectual humility. It opens the door to learning. And in a world of performative certainty, that's radical. But again, these practices alone won't save us. Not if we're swimming in a digital ocean designed to reward the exact opposite. That's why Bonhoeffer's theory ultimately points to something much bigger. The need for systemic changes, for structures that make thinking easier, not harder. So what does that actually look like? It means requiring transparency from tech companies about how their algorithms work. If a platform is feeding you content based on emotional triggers rather than accuracy, you should know that. You should have the ability to adjust it or opt out entirely. It means investing in media literacy at a massive scale. Teaching people, starting in school, how to evaluate sources, question narratives, and spot manipulation. It means reimagining platforms themselves, designing them not just to grab your attention, but to support conversation, reflection, and learning. Imagine if your feed rewarded curiosity instead of outrage. Imagine if your social network celebrated being unsure instead of being loud. And maybe most importantly, it means addressing the economic pressures that make critical thinking feel like a luxury. If people are constantly worried about rent, healthcare, childcare, job security, they don't have mental space to sift through complex policy debates. They just want relief. And that's when simple answers start sounding seductive. When people have a sense of stability, they have more bandwidth to think carefully, to be patient, to tolerate uncertainty, to learn. And that's really the heart of this. Bonhoeffer knew that stupidity wasn't just a personal weakness. It was a collective vulnerability, a tipping point where society starts to turn on itself, where people stop thinking and start obeying, where slogans replace substance, where truth becomes whatever feels good in the moment. But he also believed in something else. Hope, not blind optimism, not wishful thinking, but hope rooted in the daily practice of courage, the quiet strength of people who choose to stay curious when everyone else has given in, who question when others conform, who slow down when the world demands speed. That's what he meant by standing fast. When everything around you says, just go along. When the cost of independent thought feels too high. When the truth gets drowned out by 1,000 confident lies. Who stands fast? He asked that question in 1943. We should be asking it right now. Let's pause for a moment and sit with that question. Who stands fast? It's easy to imagine that if we were in Bonhoeffer's shoes, if we were living through something like Nazi Germany, we'd be the ones resisting. We'd be the brave ones, the ones who speak out, the ones who don't go along with the crowd. But would we? Because here's the hard truth. Standing fast isn't about dramatic moments. It's about small choices, daily ones, quiet ones, unseen ones, and those are the ones that matter most. It's about choosing to ask questions when everyone else is nodding along. It's about refusing to repeat something you haven't thought through, no matter how popular it is. It's about resisting the urge to be performatively certain and choosing instead to be authentically unsure. We live in a culture that idolizes confidence, but Bonhoeffer reminds us that confidence isn't the same as wisdom. Stupidity often speaks with conviction. Wisdom often speaks softly, carefully, with questions. That's why this theory, Bonhoeffer's theory of stupidity, isn't just a historical insight. It's a mirror, and it's showing us something uncomfortable about ourselves. Let's go deeper. Why is it that people who are otherwise intelligent, even highly educated, can fall so easily into functional stupidity? It's not because they're dumb. It's because they've been trained by systems, by incentives, by pressures to stop questioning, to prioritize belonging over truth, to choose certainty over curiosity. And the more those pressures increase, the easier it is to fall asleep mentally, even while we remain busy and active on the surface. Think about the way social validation works online. You post something thoughtful, nuanced, balanced. It gets a few likes, maybe a comment or two. But you post something angry, tribal, or overly confident. It explodes. Likes, shares, applause. We've created a system where the worst parts of us get rewarded and the most careful parts get ignored. That's not an accident. That's design. And it trains us over time to adopt those patterns, even if we don't realize it. And this goes beyond social media. It's in politics, too. Politicians are rewarded not for being honest or reflective, but for being simple, clear, repetitive, aggressive. How many politicians actually win by saying, "It's complicated," or "I'm still learning"? Very few, because our systems punish that kind of humility. Same with education. In many school systems, especially in high-pressure environments, students are trained to memorize and repeat, not to question and reflect. Tests reward the right answer, not a thoughtful process. And over time, that shapes how we think. In religion, it's often the same. In many communities, Questioning core beliefs is seen not as faithful curiosity, but as dangerous rebellion. But Bonhoeffer himself was a pastor, a deeply spiritual person, and he believed that real faith includes doubt, that truth can withstand hard questions. So what does this mean for us? It means if we want to resist stupidity, not just in others, but in ourselves, we have to actively build different habits. We have to take back our minds from the forces trying to hijack them. And we have to do it daily, thoughtfully, on purpose. Because functional stupidity doesn't show up with a warning label. It doesn't tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you're being intellectually lazy today." No, it disguises itself as conviction, as loyalty, as morality. That's what makes it so dangerous and so seductive. But there's a way out. Let's get practical again. Earlier we talked about personal practices, intellectual friction, embracing ignorance, slowing down your sharing, and saying, "I don't know." Now, let's take it one step further. 1. Build a diverse mental diet. Just like with food, what you consume mentally affects your health. If all your inputs are from the same sources, the same ideology, the same emotional tone, you're going to end up with a narrow and rigid mindset. So diversify. Read across the spectrum. Watch content from thoughtful people who challenge your assumptions. Not the loudest voices, the thoughtful ones. They're out there. Find them. 2. Make time for long form. We live in a TikTok, scroll-happy, headline-driven world. But critical thinking requires depth. It takes time. That means reading full articles, not just summaries. Watching documentaries, not just reels. Listening to entire interviews, not just cherry-picked clips. Let your brain sit with complexity. It's like stretching a muscle. It gets easier with practice. 3. Cultivate stillness. This might sound spiritual, but it's deeply practical. Stillness, whether through meditation, walking without a podcast, or just sitting quietly, gives your brain space to process. Without that space, you stay in reaction mode. And in reaction mode, thinking shuts down. 4. Talk to real people. Algorithms are designed to give you more of you, more of what you already believe. But people, real, complex human beings, don't fit neatly into algorithms. So talk to your neighbor, your coworker, your cousin who disagrees with you, not to win an argument, but to stay grounded in reality. These practices might seem small, but they're powerful. They're the mental equivalent of brushing your teeth. Do them consistently, and you stay clean. Neglect them, and decay sets in. And here's something else that's really important to remember. The moment you think you're immune to functional stupidity, you're already in trouble. Because this isn't about other people. It's not about those people over there. This is about you. It's about me. We're all vulnerable. No matter how smart we are, no matter how educated, no matter how experienced. Bonhoeffer warned us, the danger of stupidity isn't that it's visible. It's that it feels like wisdom. That's the trap. It's the comforting lie that whispers, you already know everything you need to know. No need to question. No need to change. And in that moment, your mind shuts down. Just a little. Just enough. That's why vigilance is key. Not against enemies out there, but against the drift that happens inside of us. That slow, quiet drift toward intellectual surrender. And that brings us back to Bonhoeffer himself. He didn't just talk about this stuff. He lived it. He paid for his beliefs with his life. He stood fast when it counted, not because he was fearless, but because he was committed to the truth. He saw clearly what was happening around him. The collapse of independent thought, the rise of comforting lies, the weaponization of slogans, the social rewards for blind loyalty. And he refused to play along. He wrote for a prison cell. He risked everything. He was executed by hanging in 1945, just weeks before Nazi Germany fell. His final words, as remembered by a fellow prisoner, were, "This is the end. For me, the beginning of life." That kind of clarity of moral and intellectual conviction is rare and precious, and it's what we need now more than ever. Not dramatic heroism, not grand gestures, just ordinary people choosing every single day to think carefully, to resist lazy narratives, to stay curious. That's how we stand fast. That's how we protect the future. Not with certainty, but with courage. So here's the question Bonhoeffer leaves us with, one that might be more urgent today than it's ever been. In a world that rewards intellectual surrender, will you still choose to think? Let's be honest, thinking is hard. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't come with instant gratification. You don't get a dopamine hit for pausing and reflecting. You don't go viral for saying, "I'm not sure yet." In fact, in many cases, you'll be ignored or even attacked for doing the right thing intellectually. And that's exactly what makes it powerful. We live in a culture that profits from our attention, and the quickest way to get it is to bypass the thinking brain. Fear, outrage, identity, those are the levers. And if you're not aware of them, they'll pull you like strings on a puppet. Bonhoeffer's greatest insight wasn't just that stupidity is dangerous. It's that it's comfortable. It feels good to go along, to feel certain, to be surrounded by people who agree with you, to be told, "You're right, you're smart, you're good, you're safe." But that's not truth. That's sedation. And real thinking wakes you up. It asks hard questions. It forces you to hold tension. It makes you sit with contradictions. It tells you that the world is complex, that people are nuanced, and that solutions aren't easy. Bonhoeffer believed that real freedom, the kind of freedom that makes us human, isn't just about politics or rights. It's about the freedom to think, to reason, to choose your beliefs instead of inheriting them, to examine your assumptions instead of defending them by default. That's a freedom worth fighting for, and it starts inside your own mind. Now let's get super practical, because if you've made it this far into the video, you're clearly someone who wants to push back against this trend. You want to think more clearly, live more honestly, and help create a society that values truth over tribe. Here's a challenge for this week. Take one belief you hold strongly. Any belief. Political, moral, personal, it doesn't matter. But pick one you really care about. Something you're emotionally invested in. Now, spend just 30 minutes researching the best arguments against that belief. Seriously, don't doom scroll. Don't hate watch. Actually look for the smartest, most reasonable people who disagree with you. See what they say. Listen carefully. Take notes. Why? Because this isn't about changing your mind. It's about testing it. Just like in science, a belief that survives real scrutiny becomes stronger, more grounded. And if it doesn't, then maybe it wasn't as solid as you thought. Either way, you win. You grow. You become more grounded, more aware, more intellectually resilient. That's what Bonhoeffer called costly grace. The kind of growth that doesn't come easily. That takes effort. That demands something from you. But it's the kind of growth that protects your humanity. It's the kind of growth that builds resistance, not to some external enemy, but to the most subtle and seductive enemy of all, the part of you that wants to stop thinking. And here's the most uncomfortable truth of all. None of us are immune. Not me. Not you. Not the smartest people in the room. The moment we believe we're too smart to be fooled, we're already in danger. Because that belief becomes the very blind spot that stupidity hides in. Functional stupidity doesn't come dressed like a villain. It doesn't shout, "I'm here to deceive you." It whispers, "You already know everything you need to know. You're already right. No need to look deeper." That's the trap. And the escape? It's not found in more intelligence. It's found in more humility. What psychologists now call intellectual humility, the willingness to say, "I might be wrong. Let me find out." It's not weakness. It's the foundation of wisdom. And in today's world, it's one of the most radical, powerful things you can cultivate. Let's put this all together. We live in a moment in history where information is everywhere, but wisdom is rare. Where we have access to more knowledge than ever before, but we're drowning in manipulation, distraction, and division. Where thinking deeply isn't just discouraged, it's actively pushed aside in favor of slogans, cliques, and tribalism. But that's not the whole story. Because every time you choose to pause instead of react, every time you ask a question instead of accept a script, every time you stay curious instead of becoming certain, you push back. You reclaim something sacred. You reclaim your mind. Bonhoeffer died defending that principle. He believed that human dignity depended on it. That without independent thought, we become puppets, easily swayed, easily used, easily lost. But with it, we become something else entirely. We become whole. So here's how I'd like to end this video, with a question. What's one belief you're willing to question this week? Not because you want to destroy it, but because you want to understand it better, to hold it with more integrity, to make sure it's yours, not just someone else's hand-me-down. Leave your answer in the comments. And if this video made you even slightly uncomfortable, if it made you pause and think, that's a good thing, because that's how thinking starts. And if you found this message meaningful, consider sharing it with someone you trust. Not because they need to wake up, but because there's someone who isn't afraid to ask hard questions, even when it's easier not to. Because the only thing more dangerous than stupidity is believing we can't do anything about it. But we can. And it starts with one small, quiet, revolutionary act. Think. Really think. Thanks for watching.